So welcome everybody. We are in our second to the last session. I don't know if everybody's paid attention to all the things that we've been sending out, but we have today's session with Dr. JuliAnna Stone, and then next session we've got a panel discussion, including people who have landed their next best role, and we're really excited about next week's session. So, but on to today's session is that, as you know, the COO Executives in Transition was designed for you, to help you and support you in your transition. And it's always been open to chief operating officers, other operations executives, and it's been completely pro bono. We don't pay anybody and nobody pays us. So we've really enjoyed providing this support to you as you're in your transition. It really aligns with what we do at the CO Forum. And we've been doing this for, I think, Fiona said 39 weeks as of this week. We've been hearing from people who have been landing jobs, and it's been exciting to hear that. So as you land your role, which hopefully is soon, let us know, because we'd like to celebrate that with you. And if you land back into the operations role, make sure that you get back in touch with me, Fiona or Bill, and we'd love to invite you to join us at one of our global meetings as a guest to experience what we're doing there. We'll follow the same meeting rules and guidelines that we have always done, which is to mute when you're not talking, and to we run business first. So if you have to drop off, take a call, go take a break or whatever, go ahead and do that, and just not a problem at all. Business language, no politics, because we always believe at CO Forum that works better. As you heard, we're recording the session. Fiona's got that recording. We'll upload when we're finished with this to the Mighty Network if you need to go back and view it. And if you have any job prospects in works, keep them confidential to yourself. And any questions you have as JuliAnna is presenting, post them into the chat, and we'll address them as we're moving along. Or if she may have different rules, she may ask you just to raise your hand. We'll follow what she asks us to do. As you know, Fiona kind of oversees this whole operation. So if you ever need anything, reach out to her first, because she's the most responsive, but Bill and I are always available to you as well. And with that, I would like to introduce Dr. JuliAnna Stone, whom I've had the pleasure of meeting and learning about what she's doing at her company. She is the founder and CEO of Career Life Academy, which is the first virtual career and life support services group. She specializes in recruiting, corporate outplacement, career transition, and personal branding. And Career Life Academy combines expert support and methods to help professionals like yourself find your next job. Dr. JuliAnna has helped thousands of executives find jobs throughout her career. She earned an MBA as well as a doctorate in business administration, and currently serves on the board of Chief Learning Officer magazine. Today, JuliAnna is going to share with us strategies for interview strategies for the C-suite. And I think at this point, I will turn it over to her, because she's going to share a little more about what she's doing and what she's going to cover, and we'll take over the screen. So Dr. JuliAnna, welcome, and thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us here today.
Hello, Drew. Sounds like there's people all over the world, which is very exciting. That type of coordination isn't easy from a time perspective. So as Laura stated, please, if you have any questions, raise your hand, stop me. This is a very delicate, I call it a tango, talking about the interview and going into the executive level interview. And so I hope I can do all the work my team has done and all the research justice. But just to give you a little bit of backdrop and introduce myself with a little bit more depth, I came from years and years in higher education, for-profit higher education. And the last company I was with in 2013, she decided to sell her company after raising capital. It was a startup, a global health organization that delivered disease management training to places like Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Pharma Suisse in Switzerland. And it was just really an exciting experience for me, having been in higher ed for 20 years. This brought a new twist, really focusing on more of a global reach. Well, upon selling her company, here I was at 53, thinking, oh, this shouldn't be hard. For goodness sakes, I have an MBA. I was an executive vice president. I have built technology. I've worked with the Swiss, which their work is always very meticulous. And you go back to the drawing board a lot if anyone's worked on that global level. And it was I was very optimistic. Well, I started doing what the market told me to do and the outplacement company that they hired. And that was get my resume together, get my LinkedIn profile together, start networking. I joined every single networking group you could possibly think about. And you know, at 53, I had a pretty vast group of people to network with. And so I spent a lot of time in Starbucks having coffee as well as Skyping and sharing my story. And I started applying as they told me, go to job boards and start applying and make connections. At one point, LinkedIn blackballed me because I was trying to make too many connections because I hadn't spent a lot of time networking on LinkedIn. I had been too busy helping build a company. So there I was 6 months later, extremely frustrated, really starting to question my own self-efficacy, really looking at the market and saying, okay, what am I doing wrong? I am getting interviews. They're not where I should be because I felt that I was at that last stretch of my career to really build income and, you know, start planning for my retirement. And I just couldn't understand what was I doing wrong and why wasn't I attracting the right people? I could speak the language, but there was something missing. So Career Life Academy was built out of research. It wasn't just, oh, I think I need to start a job search type of company or go into the job search industry. That was the furthest from my mind. My goal was to be a chief learning officer in some sort of healthcare system, but the market thought differently. So I want to kind of pull it all together. We'll call it putting it together. So let's see here if I can find my mouse. When we look at putting it together and what happens in a job search, because I think this is a good foundation for us to start, because I understand that I'm the second to the last, and the interview is where we all want to be. And for many of my executives, when they start working with me, I'll hear from them, my goodness, I have had 10 interviews and 0 offers. And there's a lot of questions that I ask at that point. Who are you interviewing with? Are you just having conversations with screeners? Are you having conversations with decision makers? Are you having conversations with private equity or with boards of directors? Who are you having conversations with? And by the way, are you actually applying for the right type of roles? So the old college professor in me is going to pull out my little Crayola here and write on the whiteboard here. So what traditionally happens is that we build our resume. We start to identify perhaps our network. And that network also includes LinkedIn and getting our LinkedIn profile rather pristine. And then we start applying. And this applying for the interview can mean that we're calling friends, colleagues, and asking them, is there something available? Can you pass this on? Or calling people that we know that are in leadership roles. Are you looking for a new executive? And I'm going to use the word executive instead of just focusing on COO roles. And that is traditionally what we do. But we have to think that in this process, we're always applying for the interview. I equate this to 3 different levels of fruit on a tree. There's the fruit on the tree that has fallen on the ground. It is rotting, we're stepping on it. Then there's the fruit that is the low-hanging fruit. We can reach out and pluck it off the branch. Then there's that fruit that is still green and maybe it's still growing and it's out on that limb and we have to reach to get that fruit. Well, I look at our job search being very similar as executives. We have the fruit that's on the ground. That's what we've done. We've already been there. We've done that. Our juniors are doing that. But oftentimes we're looking for roles that may encompass a lot of that fruit that's on the ground. Even if it's in a C-suite or an executive role, we've already been there. We've done that. So oftentimes when we have conversations and we don't hear back from a recruiter, it has nothing to do with us. It has a lot more to do with the fact that we may be applying for the wrong type of role. We're looking at the wrong level of fruit. Then the fruit that is low hanging, that is the fruit that's easy to pluck off. Well, that's the stuff that we are currently doing, exercising current competencies and skills. And then we have the fruit that's out on a limb. That's when we have this whole toolbox full of information that perhaps we're not utilizing. We're thinking, well, you know, that company's too large, or it's in technology and I've been in manufacturing, or I've been in oil and gas and that's in food service, but I think I could do all the work. That's kind of going out on a limb. So in this whole process, it isn't just about the interview and acing the interview, because you could ace the interview and get the offer, but it could be for a role that isn't ideal. So this whole process must work together. And there must be a cohesive strategy throughout this whole process that lands you the right type of interviews. As Jim Collins wrote in Good to Great, I'm sure many of you have read Good to Great. If you have, it's probably been many years, because I don't think that it's on the bestseller list right now, but it is a fabulous book that really does talk about the right seat in the right bus. So when we start to think about what is our right seat and what is our right bus, we have to be able to have more of a strategic approach. And that's really important as we start to think about how do we take the lead in our search that leads us to the right interviews. And yes, I know you've spoken and you've had conversations and presentations by a lot of people perhaps sharing this, but to me, it's a job search is a holistic approach. It isn't just one aspect and then putting in the next aspect. This is all a holistic approach. And what I'm sharing with you also is going to be critical in the interview process, which we're going to get to here shortly. So when we look at the interview process and how you have to prepare, we also look at how do you build a business case that prepares us to walk in and have these high-level conversations. Now, in these job searches lately, I have my C-suite individuals saying, you know, I've gotten calls from 3 recruiters for the same role. Or I just got a call from people I lovingly refer to as the entry-level screeners, who simply have a sheet of paper and they've probably worked, that individual has probably worked for you in the past, and they have a Likert scale or they have a checkbox that they're trying to identify, are you the right fit to push on to the next level? So first of all, when you start to have when you start to have interviews with that level, it's a different type of interview than when you start to have a conversation with someone at your level, or the board of directors, or the private equity firm, or anyone who is truly in a decision-making, at a decision-making level. So when you start to think of putting this all together and taking the lead in this search, one of the things that we always work with our executives on is to really understand what that conversation is going to look like. Statistically, and think about yourselves, and I'm sure that you've hired many people throughout your career, in 90 seconds, the decision maker knows whether you are the right person or not for the role. They are assessing, they're processing in their brain. Do I see Chris in this role? Do I see Ricardo in this role? Do I see them interacting and acting as in the position that I'm trying to fill? So you have 90 seconds or less to make the right type of impression. They've read your CV in some cases, your resume in other cases, and they know what you bring to the table on paper. But is that going to get you the offer? That's always that question. Is that going to get you the offer, right? So we have this methodology that we use, and we incorporate it in every single search all the way through to the negotiation piece. And that is, what is your purpose in this company? Are you in there to make the company money? Are you in there to save the company money? To help the company remain compliant or regulatory? I like to call it keep the company out of jail. Or are you in there to help with all 3, or perhaps 2 of the 3? You need to establish this before you go into this interview, because you need to be able to answer that question, why? If in those first 90 seconds, they have made a decision, whether you are the right person or not, the conversation cannot stay light. You need to be able to read it, because you still can recover. If they're feeling in those 90 seconds, oh, JuliAnna is just not the right person, I still have perhaps 45 minutes to recover. So I need to be prepared by going in and being able to speak to, why do they really need me in there? They could say, well, we need a COO that can really keep things between the lines and, you know, have oversight for the IT group, as well as maybe HR. Okay, that's great. But is my goal here to just help them keep things between the lines? No, I'm an executive coming in. I may be part of the board of directors. I may be really instrumental in helping this company to make money or to save money or to help them remain compliant. You need to establish that. Many times we go in and we talk about a lot of the things that we've done, but if you could put it into this formula, then you can have the confidence when you start having these conversations and these very high level conversations. The outcome when you walk in is not just keeping things between the lines, because this CEO or the president may be just so busy that they haven't even really defined all of the things that they're expecting of you. And also depending on the level of company. Are you going into a startup, an infant company? They need to raise capital. They lack structure, but they have heard about how you could come in and create structure around an organization. But it's not just to create the structure, it's probably to also have a decent EBITDA so that they can continue raising capital. Or is it a company that's in adolescence? If it's a company in adolescence, you know that in 5 to 7 years, they're going to either start acquiring, they're going to be acquired, they're going to be sold, and all depending on who's invested in them. If it is a company like Salesforce Ventures, you know Salesforce has something up their sleeve. Salesforce Ventures just doesn't invest in a company because they're saying, oh, that's a great company. No, there is a long-term plan. So you need to know who's investing in this company, because then you know you're not only going in there to help help that company save money in a operations role, but you're also going to help them indirectly to make money. And then you're going to provide them evidence. I like to tell this story. I had this gentleman that we worked with from Chicago. He was just the most interesting person. He had worked with all the top fashion designers. Many of the top stores that are around were because of his genius operations mind. Companies like Coach, like Versace, like Louis Vuitton. This guy hadn't had to look for a job, and he is like 55 years old. He's not done working. And he interviews and he interviews and he interviews. The retail market, especially fashion, is a very youthful market. And so he was struggling. And when he would go into interviews, he would pull out those conversations and he'd say, you know, when I was having a conversation with, I will say, whoever was the founder of Coach, we had this conversation. But he never got to why they had those conversations, what that value was. If you remember, those of you that have an MBA, in your organizational development class, they talked about all the case studies that show that there are only 3 reasons a company hires, whether it is a company that is for profit, an organization that is not for profit. The only organization that doesn't fit this formula is the federal government, state, or local government. But every single organization hires people to fit in one of these 3 buckets because they will affect that bucket either directly or indirectly. So you need to be able to provide that outcome. Then your evidence needs to be very specific to the outcome, even in your conversations. You don't want to digress and say, yeah, you know, in 1965, when I was sitting at the table with Louis Vuitton or whomever it was. You cannot have those conversations, especially the way interviews are structured now. Then you need, unless there's small talk and it leads to this, then we look at tools. Tools are very interesting. I worked with a CTO recently who, I think if there was a program that has ever been written, he has learned how to write. He is also a genius architect. He calls himself a quantum computer scientist because he's just into AI. But his resume was, and his conversations were filled with so much about all of these different things that he wrote, that he was struggling to really have a conversation about how he would lead a team, how he would architect a network, how he would integrate different platforms. And so he was really suffering because he wanted to talk about, yeah, you know, I just took a class in blockchain, or I'm really up on AI. Well, that's great conversation, but you're usually having that conversation when you're having it with your junior. So know the level you're speaking with and know exactly what tools you leverage. For those of you that have certifications, that have MBAs or other master's degrees, those are not tools, those are toolboxes. And utilize those toolboxes to help you leverage yourself to answer that question, why? So this is starting the building process. I like to share this with you because preparing yourself is a pretty interesting thing. I've had people in Salt Lake City, in Salt Lake City, who are working at, we'll say, the Silicon Slopes. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the Silicon Slopes, but it is where the Silicon Valley has moved into the area that is just a little bit, well, it's a little bit north of the mountains, west of the mountains, and kind of goes into the mountains in that corridor. And you have all these Silicon Valley companies that have settled there. And you have Adobe, you have Microsoft, all of those techie companies. Well, the people in Salt Lake, they before were very, we'll call them IBM. They wore suits, they wore ties. Silicon Slopes sets in, everyone is interviewing looking like this guy. And he has a really great little video, but for some reason it's just not playing for us today, which is okay. Oh, there he is. Yeah, so this is what we see a lot of in Seattle, in the Silicon Valley, in the Silicon Slopes. Well, not at the C-suite though. At the C-suite, you really need to be prepared. Now I'm going to go back to this slide because it's really important to remember. And if anyone wants this information, I know it's being recorded, please let me know. I'm happy to share this slide deck as well. Are you in there to make money, save money, or as JuliAnna says, keep them out of jail? The why you. So I wanted to share a little bit of how the why you starts to be prepared. Anyone who works with us, we work on this formula called problem. Some people call it stars, some people call it other things, but we like to really aggregate things. So we call it problem, intervention, and outcome. So this is a CEO. The problem was, he came in, here was the intervention, and then here was the outcome. Remember what I talked about here. We have outcome. This is why they're bringing you in. Grew EBITDA, lowered inventory. Now you may say, these are exactly the types of conversations I have on my narrative within my resume. But you need to be able once they start asking you the questions, to be able to speak to them. So I like to say, I'm going to use that formula again. There's a problem a company has. The problem was they weren't making money. My intervention was to come in and establish, was it because their revenue was low, or was it because their expenses were high? What was the outcome? The outcome, I was able to readjust the processes that were put in place, reestablish policy, and we started to see our margin increase. So when you can talk on those terms, you start to see yourself really being able to go in and solve a company's problem. Any questions? This is a really good opportunity. If there's any questions, please let me know. Okay. And I know our time is limited. When we work with a client, this is actually, probably about a 4-hour process, not all at one time, but it's about a 4-hour process. And that's after they have done some preliminary work. So here is an example of how you want to be prepared. So you can just immediately think, oh yeah, they're asking me a question about a time where I was able to grow the EBITDA. Or they asked me a question about how I was able to lower inventory and bring down costs and increase process. So as we start to move through the process of who you're interviewing with, let's compare now. Because when you start having conversations with HR, their conversations, I don't know. Oh, Chris, please go ahead.
Thanks. My question is in relation to those 3 pillars and the sort of cultural and business landscape that we exist in now. Is there the need to put a little twist or spin on those 3 pillars as it relates to how we articulate how we can help a company succeed or stay out of jail or cut costs? Because to a pretty large degree, at least in my experience over the last 15 months, and certainly in my experiences over the last couple of weeks, as people start to think about the fall and the resumption of whatever normal looks like, there's a lot of uncertainty still as it relates to the right type of business. Is it a hybrid? Are we mandating that everyone comes back? What are we doing about talent? Certainly everything that I'm reading suggests that there's going to be a significant exodus of talent from a lot of organizations over the next year. So do you have any thoughts as to, again, within that context of those 3 pillars and how you can, again, sort of very clearly articulate sort of your brand? Is part of that articulation exhibiting curiosity, exhibiting proactivity? Is there, in today's world, what else do you need to bring to highlight that you're focused on, like everybody else, figuring this out? Because this new world in terms of taking the lead is not there is no North Star, right? It's very amorphic right now.
Right. I love that question. Thank you, because we have given it tons of thought. And the reason that this became extremely apparent was during the beginning of COVID. So we'll say from April till about July, we still saw a lot of hiring at the C-suite or at the executive level. Come July is usually a very strange month, but this year it wasn't, because people were still at home and working from home. So we measured a lot of the activities that were occurring in July all the way to October. And what we started to notice that was a lot of the conversations were around fear and uncertainty. How would you manage this? We worked with a gentleman, I'm going to use this company's name because it's so large that anytime we work with someone, it's very confidential, but this will bring a lot of light. He had a very large team at JP Morgan. They had to disperse to their homes, obviously, and they saw productivity go down. And one of the biggest problems was he didn't know how to engage them. So he had morning huddles, and everyone would wake up in the mornings and put on their shirt and probably their yoga pants or their sweatpants on the bottom, and they would have the morning huddle. And then during the rest of the day, there was a lot of gaming going on. That's how they interacted with one another because of their age group. And then he would have a huddle in the evening, which they would be prepared, and then they would speak to what their activity was like. So he felt that he was doing all the right things. He took the model that he would have had normally and tried to implement it into their current state. Well, he lost his position. So here he is in December, extremely concerned. My team didn't make it. So we actually had him reevaluate his leadership style. And one of the things he continuously said to me is that he was a steward leader with a lot of let me try to get this right. Steward leader with a lot of situational leader elements. And so asked him to go back and really do a little bit of studying. Recommended actually a leadership course through Coursera that was being offered by the University of Michigan. He did feel a little insulted, but I'm a tough love kind of gal. So I want my executives to find positions. So he did, we touched base, and he started to really establish that he was an extremely he was more on the extreme side of a steward leader and was not able to be more of a situation leader to be able to shift. So we had to be able to get him to start thinking different, as well as we needed him to start focusing on where he influenced the buckets. As far as how he was going to influence them, that came in the conversations. And that came in developing this type of a conversation. Now, he didn't have a previous frame of reference, which is one of those cognitive devices that we rely on. If I don't have a previous frame of reference, because who had a previous frame of reference other than those companies that had been working in more of a remote environment? So he had to establish, oh, had I done this, then I could have seen these results. So Chris, you're absolutely right. We did have to shift, but we haven't had to add any more of the fundamentals that make up the pillars or the buckets here on the side in establishing the why, because this becomes the foundation. Where it starts to unravel is in the questions. And you'll see that here in a second when we start to talk about what are the types of questions that are asked, because you have different groups that ask you different questions. If you're having a conversation with the chief human resource officer, they're asking you the same questions because they just asked the person that interviewed before you the exact same questions. And those are like, what responsibilities in this job are going to define success for you? They're light. I equate this to having conversations at different levels with children. So when you have a child, you have short sentences, your vocabulary is short. They're usually not a lot of flowery language. It's go get the salt once you teach them this. As your children grow, you start to have more dynamic conversations with them. So HR's questions are, we'll call middle tier level. They're not sophisticated questions. When they start to get sophisticated is when you get into having the conversations with the private equity, with the president, with the board of directors. That's when the questions start to change. And this, Chris, is where those types of questions and how you now have that conversation starts to distinguish you or differentiate you. Because you're right, we have no idea what this looks like. We had an executive who was in Seattle, was hired by Peloton to move to, and they moved him to Atlanta only to work remote. So he's in Seattle, they move him to Atlanta, and I talked to him 6 months later because he was hired in June, and I talked to him for Christmas, and he was still working remote. So we don't know what's happening. So we have to be very, very clear on ourselves. And I'm going to come back to this. And that is really understanding our leadership style. Because we can't go in there and say, well, I am a bureaucratic leader. We don't have time for everyone to raise their hands. And that was one of the things that we have seen. The type of executives that are getting hired are not those ones that talk about, well, I have an open door policy. That is probably one of the questions or one of the answers you never want to use right now. You want to be able to use a very directive, very let's get this done. And what we have found that the most powerful type of leadership discussion is one that is about being a transformational leader. Because a transformational leader can take people who have been put in a completely different type of environment and are able to almost create a blank slate and get them engaged and encouraged to see things. Let's say there's a lot of visionary aspects to this, how things are going to be. And that is a transformational leader. So in our work now and in the data that we have been collecting, this transformational leadership seems to be driving a lot of the conversations. Does that help you, Chris, just a little bit?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think, again, I think the sweet spot is probably throwing all of these into a bucket and choosing which one you need on an hourly basis in today's world. But I take your point. These are
right.
The things that need to be focused on.
And so most of them, when we look and say, ask ourselves based on the leaders that have been hired, just in the last 3 months, we've had several CEOs, a couple of COOs. They have been the real drivers. So I wanted to show this profile. This is a psychometric instrument that we use when we are working with an executive. And if you wanted to just take it and go to my website, careerlifeacademy.com, you get a modified version. But it has been a real important aspect to helping our leaders really identify how they will structure their conversations. So here, this is a perfect example. This is an individual who is a profound builder, innovator, and we know that these are their innate characteristics. I wish I had more time to go into this, but if you'd like to learn more, sit with me, please, by all means, just go to the website, and all of my contact information is there as well. But this is like creating a mission statement, which really defines this person. And this person is very action oriented as a leader, very solutions driven, very independent, and works really well in those business situations that require long lasting structures or systems to be built. So like I said, a job search is a holistic approach. So in the interview, this is some great information, but we're also looking at the right seat in the right bus, which means that the type of companies this person is focusing on has a lot more to do with their leadership style and less to do with the openings that are on the job boards. So this type of individual works extremely well in an organization that is really changing rapidly, needs immediate action, needs appropriate solutions that can be put into place quickly. They are really good at solving problems on the fly. This high innovator is what told us that they are the right person for an organization that is changing rapidly, which most organizations are right now, but also failing situations. So they're having conversations about how can we go in there and help increase revenue and decrease expenses. Or they're talking to companies that are in that middle tier because they need extreme growth because they're being funded. And right now, they're startups or I like to call them adolescent companies. There is so much funding going on. You just need to read the Financial Times, or we use Crunchbase, which is a financial tracking database, and you're seeing how much money every day is being invested. Billions of dollars are being invested. So you need to also know before you even get to the interview, and why the interview is only complementing all the other work you've done, is because you know who you are and the type of company you serve best. So in this preparation, I look at a lot of what the Pareto principle. When we're preparing, this is statistically 80% of our time is being spent studying the company, looking at LinkedIn, maybe pulling their 10K, doing some research. That's all well and fine, but this should actually be only 65. 35% of the time should be preparing yourself. Those differentiating factors, knowing your value, but also knowing your limitations. Making sure that your brand is not, well, this is my brand. No, the brand should really go back to, when I walk in, I'm coming in to be able to solve one of these problems. That is my brand. Because I want them, when they walk out, for it to be branded in their head. Yeah, JuliAnna is the person that could come in here and help us make money, save money, or help us to remain compliant. Because we don't want, an end run on our hands if we are also managing the accounting side. So now we also have to know how to promote ourselves, leveraging business intelligence. I love this phrase by Sun Tzu, because if we don't know ourselves, we're going to struggle in this. And many times we know ourselves based on what we've done. We need to know what our capacity is. Our capacity is to work in a company that has a lot of problems, or a company that is losing money, or a company that needs to make a lot of money, or a company that is so highly regulated like healthcare or education, or other, maybe even in the technology and the cybersecurity world. I really need to know where my capacity is, because knowing the enemy, which I always refer to as the other candidates, knowing what they're looking for, knowing yourself is so important. If not, I use the terms, you show up to a football game wearing your golfing shoes. And so maybe that's not the right landscape to be wearing those type of shoes. You need to be prepared. And I told Laura that I would stop now so we could answer any other questions. A job search leaves us very vulnerable. There's nothing worse than having an interview and not hearing back. Oftentimes it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with, this is right now a very confusing time. Even the recruiters oftentimes don't know who they're looking for. So knowing the type of companies is really that you belong in, knowing yourself really sets you up for the right environment, and then preparing yourself for the interview to answer those simple fundamental questions. Am I here to help them make money, save money, or am I here to help this organization remain compliant, or perhaps all three? So it goes back to the why you and your capacity. So this gentleman, he is working in a he's working in a very interesting company that is going to be competing against like a Ring Central. It's I call it a adolescent company or Google circa pre-IPO. And they need someone who had a vast amount of knowledge, creating structure, growing, reducing expenses, helping to increase EBITDA. So this was before we even got to the interview, he was already prepared, because we knew exactly where that company stood from a financial perspective, who was investing in them, who was planning on investing in them, what their current revenue was. We even knew how many clicks their website got on a monthly basis. So we knew, oh, it's down right now. So they may say that they're in a growth, but why is their click-throughs on their website down? That's all part of the preparation for the interview. So I'm going to pause there and see if you have any questions.
So Dr. Stone, good morning, and thank you so much. Any different advice than what you have shared for those of us who are in the nonprofit sector, where the philosophy and the mindset is quite different, many times than what we've been talking about here, the corporate sector and the related language?
Absolutely. So we have managed high-level searches for World Health, for World Relief, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, it is out of Boone. Oh my goodness, I can't remember it off the top of my head because we've managed so many, but we've managed many nonprofit. The fundamentals are still the same. You cannot run a nonprofit without money. It must be profitable somehow, even if it's $1, because no one is getting paid and eventually something happens. So the chief administrative officer at World Relief, he allowed us to use his information because he became a testimonial later on, Barry. We had to use this same foundational information. We built his job search exactly the same because he needed to show how he could keep expenses down, help them with fundraising, keep within whatever I think they were a 503 B or C, still keep within the compliant aspect of that. And as a chief administrative officer, which maybe in a traditional organization, it would have been a COO role, we still had to speak in these terms. It didn't make any difference. That's why I say the only organization that doesn't follow these rules is the government, is a government agency. Because they don't care if they're spending a lot of money or they're making a lot of money. That's not their purpose, right? It should be. I know it's not supposed to be political, but sorry, I just can't help myself. But that is the only organization, and it's tried to be disputed. There's been case studies, there's been research, and there is no proof that it would exist in a government organization. So, any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, I wonder, can you talk a little bit
Yes,
more
please.
about, yeah. You sort of touched on the mission statement, and the slide talks about sort of the builder quadrant in particular, but how you think about that mission statement, and do you see it being variable depending upon the job you're looking at? So emphasizing different elements here, or is this more of a sort of know thyself to find the right fit?
Yes, I love that question, and it's very important because this is not how we're taught to do a job search. We're taught very differently, and all of the information out there is very anecdotal. And so when we put together this process, we said, we can't have our executives go to job boards. Statistically, job boards only represent 15% of the market. And about 4%, which again, we're hypothesizing here, about 4% of that market are positions that we refer to as red herrings. They actually don't exist. That's why you see them months later. And there's also a portion of those that are positions that have already been earmarked for someone else. So we estimate about 8%. So when you're at the executive level, you're only dealing with the small amount, which is the bottom of the funnel of positions that are posted on job boards. So we knew that, and this was tested on me. That's how we designed this. It's called a predictive model. We tested it on me, and it worked. In 6 weeks, I had 10 interviews, 3 offers. And it was just like, ooh, finally, because I had been working for months and months and months. And I was also looking for a certain income because I had come from a certain income. So there was a lot of things, but I thought I did it just the traditional way, as I showed you earlier, how it's done. So creating this predictive model started first with evaluating who I was. Evaluating who I was changed my search completely, because then I could focus on the type of companies that had a demand. Basic economics. That company has a demand. I could fill it. I had the capacity to fill it, either by competency, skills, perhaps some of the tools in my toolbox, the other types of companies I've worked for, organizations, the type of problems I've helped solve. Remember, problem, intervention, outcome. I was able to put that together, PO, to be able to say, these are the type of companies I should be targeting. Once I went into a targeted focus, my search changed completely. But this was a big part of it, was utilizing a psychometric instrument to be able to understand where my capacity lived. And my capacity lived I'm going to use this as an example. This is not my profile, is having understood that I was a high builder and a high innovator means that I am a problem solver. I'm really, really good at problem solving. I'm also very strategic in nature, but I also get things done. Don't let me see any grass growing underneath my feet. So this was the beginning of saying, what type of companies have this type of demand? Are they the oracles of the world? Are they more of those mature companies? Well, this profile would probably be extremely disruptive in those types of organizations. But there are organizations who need people who are thinking about solutions at the same time getting things done. So they have their hands kind of moving like this. So that was a real eye-opener, Robert, for us to be able to say, now we know this person is, as a leader, is action-oriented, solution-driven, independent. So don't go after those types of roles that give them a lot of responsibility, but no authority. Let's look for those type of organizations that are trying to build lasting structure. So maybe we need to focus on the $10 million company that is trying to grow to 50 million. And those are easy to find. I mean, they're all over out there. They need someone who can go in there and help with this. But they need to get it done quickly because they may be in a market that is being challenged by other organizations growing and taking over market share. But this, we also know this profile is an individual who works extremely well in isolation. So this person could be a leader, could be in the C-suite or an executive working at home, managing a global team, because this told us that this person knows how to observe and measure the worth of people and things and how to connect them so they could get people to work more effectively. So this is a person that we would definitely recommend to say, you really should be working. I mean, you could actually be working in a remote environment. However, if we had someone with the opposite type of profile, we'd highly recommend that they'd look for organizations where they could go in 2 to 3 times a week, or where they could have a lot more in leadership role, more interaction, perhaps be at headquarters, because we were then able to understand what their capacity was. So then that leads to the next thing, now going after those companies. Now those companies are interested because we have established the fact that company, you need to make money, but you also need to make money at the save money at the same time. I can do that. That's my narrative, also known as resume. When they call my for the interview, my conversations need to be around those 3 different buckets. Make sense?
Yeah, I got you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have some questions? Kurt, did you have a question?
No, this has been helpful. I've taken a few personality psychometric tests going into a few roles I had. And, I'm thinking about a recent interview I had where I talked about that and trying to find companies that it aligns more with. It's probably better going forward. So good insight there.
Yeah, there's thousands of companies out there, hundreds and thousands of companies. And we work with these groups. We work with 45 colleges and universities. That's another part of our business. With these people that are graduating from these boot camps, they're technology boot camps. And so many of them have already had careers and then they decide, I better get into technology. So we have people who are teachers who went and learned how to learned UI and UX. And they're now saying, no one wants to hire me because all I have now is the certification from Vanderbilt that I have a UI and UX certification. That is all well and fine, but they don't know how to bring it together. So they go to job boards and start applying for UI UX. And I know you guys are a lot higher than this, but you could translate it to your situations. We take this teacher because ed tech is a huge market right now. Most kids are studying from home. College students are now, this is going to be a new thing. So education technology needs subject matter experts who have an understanding in their toolbox of technology. And now he's interviewing with ed tech companies, something he never thought about. He was going after jobs that were in the UI UX world instead of going after ed tech and marrying the two. And oftentimes when we're transferring our skills, we don't create that microcosm. If I'm in healthcare and I can't get back into healthcare, well then what about the microcosm that healthcare has created? There's hundreds of thousands of companies out there that support that. So that's an example. Laura,
Wonderful.
I think I'm done with my time, right?
Awesome. Yes. And I know that you had a lot more that you could share, but there's only so much we can do in the 55 minutes that we give you.
Right.
So thank you so much. I know, were you going to offer something to the group that
I am.
we're going to do a little raffle maybe?
Absolutely. So here's the deal. We have what's called iRocket Interview Platform. It is a really cool platform. I don't care if you have interviewed 10,000 people or only 5 people, you are still put into the iRocket interview platform. You are asked 20 very difficult questions. You can also be asked industry related questions if you choose, but these are behavioral, communication, critical thinking types of questions, strategic thinking types of questions. And there's 2 different sets. We have the one for the people who want to continue to work in a remote environment, and those that aren't that interested in a remote environment. So there's 2 sets of questions because the questions now are different. And what we're inviting for 2 of you to, whoever posts the number that's closest between 1 and 50 to the one I'm going to show you here in a second, we want to give you access to our iRocket interview platform, which also goes over the strategies and tactics that you should be using based on problem, intervention, and outcome. So it is a little standalone class, and then you can have unlimited access to practicing. And then you send it to us and we will give you our feedback on how to prepare for the interview. So you video record yourself, in essence, answering these questions. So if anyone would like to be a part of this, and we had talked about anyone who, excuse me, anyone who is an active search. If you're not an active search, well, why would you need this, right? But if you're in an active search, just put a number in here if you're interested. And once Laura says, okay, I will show the number.
So between 1 and 50, put your number in the chat, and then JuliAnna, tell us what her number is. Oh.
Excuse me.
Everybody have a chance to put your number in? Okay, looks like we're there. Go ahead, JuliAnna.
Yeah, where is it? Should be in. Well, here we go. There it is. I knew it was somewhere. So it's 25. Looks like Sing Sing and Izzy.
There you go.
Awesome. So here is my personal email address. Oh, too many. If anyone would like to take that assessment or have any questions, there are many assessments. Being in academics, I am MBTI, which is the Myers-Briggs. I'm strong. I am DISC certified, and a couple of others that are very academic. And I continue to license this one because it is the most powerful at measuring capacity. And that's what you want to measure when you're in a job search. What is my capacity?
Wonderful. JuliAnna, thank you so much for taking your time today and sharing with everybody here. And I put her LinkedIn profile in the chat. Feel free to connect to her because I think that'd be worthwhile, and reach out to her at her email address that she provided. And if you need to go back, obviously we always record these, so we'll put them up on the Mighty Network. But everybody, thank you. And don't miss next week. We're going to have a great session, panel discussion, and we're at most of our thought leaders. I think JuliAnna at RSVP guest that she'll join us next week as well. So it'll be a good turnout, good group, and have a great day. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Steph.
Thank you.